literacy and has been training teachers for the last 10 years. She is an academic consultant for National Geographic Learning, who are our sponsor for this web conference. And she's a presenter for Trinity College London in Argentina and a teacher educator at EFS ARP Argentina. Over to you, Luciana.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. May I have my slides, please? Oh, great. That's great. Okay. Hello, everyone. I am so excited to be participating in this wonderful web conference. My name is Luciana Fernández, and I am from Buenos Aires, Argentina. I'm going to be talking about whether we should be using storybooks or story hooks. And I will be discussing the importance of developing visual literacy in primary Argentinian schools. Before we move any further, I would like to tell you that I am a teacher trainer and a consultant, and I visit lots of schools in my country, not only in Buenos Aires, but in other places in my country as well. And what I'm about to present today is the result of some research and some observations that I carried out when visiting schools. Something that I noticed when visiting schools and watching teachers in action is that teachers were using storybooks and that they were using read-alouds, and that actually there were moments devoted in the classroom to sharing storybooks with the children. Now, something that I also noticed is that in some opportunities, it was just that, just reading a book to the children, just for the sake of doing something different in the classroom. And if there was a discussion based on the storybook, something that I couldn't help noticing was that the discussion was based mostly on convergent questions, or questions which did not demand much thinking. For example, looking at the cover of the book and asking questions such as, what can you see? Or simply describe the picture, or questions such as, what is she or he doing? Or what's the weather like? Questions which could be answered very easily by the children, and my impression was that these were questions which were being asked for the sake of giving children also the opportunity to practice some vocabulary or structures. So with a group of teachers that I was working with, we decided to do some research and implement certain practices, because it was and it is our belief that reading aloud, apart from the fun of it, is an excellent opportunity to develop literacy skills. So, having said that, I would like to go over some key concepts that I will be covering in my presentation today. First of all, and it is in the title of my presentation, I will be talking about the development of visual literacy. I don't want to take for granted that we all know what it is, so I would like to mention that visual literacy is the ability to interpret, negotiate, and make meaning from information presented in the form of an image, extending the meaning of literacy, which commonly signifies interpretation of a written or printed text. Visual literacy is based on the idea that pictures can be read and that meaning can be communicated through a process of reading. So, as I always like to say, visual literacy is, of course, the ability to think critically about what we see, about images, about photographs, and of course, Storybooks provide an excellent opportunity to develop visual literacy. Another key concept that I will be covering in my presentation today is that of previewing. Previewing a book means that you get an idea of what it is about without actually reading it. And this is a skill for life. This is something that high-quality readers do. This is something that high-quality thinkers do. So we are going to explore today a couple of very interesting activities to engage students not only in the development of visual literacy, but also in being very good at previewing. Other key concepts that I would like to clarify before we go to the activities which we actually implemented in primary schools in Argentina is how important it is that when using storybooks, we also develop and teach explicitly reading strategies. I have compiled here a list of reading strategies, which are the reading strategies used by high-quality readers. First of all, high-quality readers are able to connect to the text. They need to make connections. We will be talking a lot about this today. High-quality readers ask questions. They pose questions before reading. They've got questions in their minds before they read. And this is absolutely connected to the title of my presentation. That is how we get hooked on something, because we've got questions that we want the answer for. Another strategy that we should develop, and it's part of very strong literacy skills, is working with vocabulary. So it's really very important that when we choose the storybooks to use in our classes, we are pretty aware of how familiar the vocabulary in the storybooks is. Other strategies have to do with making predictions and then, of course, cross-checking those initial predictions. Something that I love noticing when dealing with storybooks with children is that when they make predictions, their faces when they finally can cross-check those predictions can actually go like, oh yes, this is exactly what I predicted, or surprise faces like, this is not what I predicted. And I always say that predicting is not wild guessing. A prediction is based on evidence. It is, of course, showing lots and lots of thinking. Other things that high-quality readers do is that they use their senses. The more you use your senses, the more understanding you've got about stories. And we are going to get into these pretty soon, I promise. Other things that high-quality readers do is actually focus on what's important. They are able to make inferences and draw conclusions. And of course, as a result of being able to decide what's more important to pay attention to, they can summarize and synthesize. And of course, high-quality readers are constantly checking their understanding, and they, of course, are very fluent. So these reading strategies, these top reading strategies, are absolutely critical when it comes to literacy, and storybooks provide an excellent opportunity to develop these strategies. And one more key concept that I want to make sure everybody is familiar with is that of critical thinking, which is the ability to engage in reflective and independent thinking. So with a group of teachers that I was working with, we decided to do something so that read-alouds were not just that, read-alouds. This is what we would notice, that many of the teachers that we were working with would use storybooks and they would have reading aloud moments in their classes, but not much was going on apart from just reading a story to the children. So our project was based on the following. Research on evidence-based practices that encourage children's engagement with storybooks. So most of the things that you will see that we implemented in the classroom is based on, of course, research that says that children, the more engaged they are, the more they are developing their thinking, and the more, of course, we are going to create the need for them to use the language that we are teaching. Reading is obtaining meaning from printed material. Yes, reading is obtaining meaning. And we thought that this was so important. Reading aloud to the children is an excellent opportunity to train our primary kids in being meaning makers. The transactional theory, we really read a lot about this, and then of course if you're interested I can share material, maintains that the reader must transact with the text to make meaning. And we are with the teachers I was working with, we are absolute believers of this. It is this transaction with the text that is going to help our students really become these meaning makers I was talking about. When reading or listening to text, the reader or the listener draws on several interacting knowledge sources to make meaning. And I'm going to highlight here this question of sources. What exactly is it that we use to make meaning out of something? So with a bunch of teacher trainees and teachers, we started thinking about activities that we could take to the classrooms to really make the reading aloud moment, the moment in which teachers were working with storybooks, really a moment of story hooks. So I'm going to start sharing with all of you some of our very successful practices in order to develop visual literacy, critical thinking, reading strategies, and more. So actually what we wanted to do was redefine this moment. We wanted to redefine the reading aloud, and we wanted to move just from the mere act of reading a storybook to the children. So the first thing we started doing, and it has given us great results, so I will really be inviting all of you to give it a try, is of course work with book covers. Book covers are an excellent opportunity for teachers and students to engage in previewing. Remember, it was a key concept. So we decided to make this thinking that occurs in the children's minds visible by creating these visible thinking previewing routines, and this is called the cover walk and preview. So the children were encouraged to read the title of the book and take a cover walk. That's how we called it. Take a cover walk, which is slow looking the cover of the book, paying attention not only to the title but also to the pictures. I love the concept of slow looking, which is paying attention to details. And then, of course, we also encourage the children to look at the back cover. This slow looking moment was a silent moment, a moment in which we wanted the children to be really concentrated. And then after being very good observers, after the book cover walk and after the previewing, we asked the children to jot down. In the case of the very little ones, sometimes this jotting down became drawing. That is also a possibility. So we wanted them to jot down 3 things that they've learned just by looking at the title and the pictures in the cover and the back cover. And right after that, we also encouraged the children to try to make a prediction. This was really very successful. It was really very good. And of course, and this is something that we discussed with the teachers working on this project, there was some, of course, the kids were using a little bit of Spanish, in this case their mother tongue, but it was interesting because we were making them notice that they didn't have the English for the things they wanted to say, which means that there was a lot of motivation to really learn the words and the structures that they needed in order to be able to say what they had noticed and their predictions. So we really, really made sure that everybody could share the things they had learned and their predictions, because it became a moment in which there was, if you wanted, a little bit of arguing, because children would disagree, like, oh no, but I've got a different prediction, or I've learned something different. So it's not only that they could learn from their own observations and their own previewing, but they could also learn from what the others, what is it that had happened in their partners' minds. Another activity that we also found very useful was this before reading and after reading. So we would encourage, again, the students to make predictions based on the title. It's really very important that we help our students focus on the title and make predictions. And then, of course, a prediction based on the images on the cover. And we asked students to actually jot it down. This is an activity that children can do individually or in groups. And then after reading, we would make them go back to their initial predictions, of course, so that they could cross-check. Something that I mentioned regarding reading strategies is that it's really very important that readers have questions, pose questions before they read. And the truth is that when you make them predict, their own predictions become questions. Like, if my prediction is, I think the girl's gonna, I don't know, the girl is going to find something, it becomes a question. Will the girl find that something? So remember that making students make predictions, and very importantly, ask them what makes them say that, will really train them in previewing as a skill that they will need for life, not only for storybooks, but also for texts. And it's really very important, because that's how you already get them hooked. A very, very nice routine has to do with the development of visual literacy. And I would like to share with you some routines that really, really work. This is one of my favorite, and it's called I See, I Think, I Wonder. Something that I mentioned today at the very beginning of my presentation is that I noticed when watching teachers in action was that the question that you would get the most was, what can you see? And actually, there is nothing wrong with asking our children when we are dealing with storybooks, asking them, what can you see? The problem is just remaining there. Okay, what can you see? And okay, that which you see has to get you started with your own thinking. So this is a routine that helps the children learn that you need to be a good observer, you need to see, but what you see needs to get you hooked on your thinking. So I see a sad duckling, so I think, or maybe I see a duckling that is crying, so I think the duckling is sad. And what do I wonder? Why is the duckling sad? This is how it works, and it gives excellent results. Something that I am showing you on the slide there, as you can very well see, is that as language teachers, we have to teach our learners the language for thinking. So the structures such as I see, I can see, there is, there are, I observe, I think I can add to that, I think the reason is, I think it is made of, I disagree. All these sentence starters are going to back up our English language learners in becoming active when we are previewing or developing visual literacy. I wonder why, I wonder if, I wonder how, I would like to know. So providing students with these sentence starters plus the vocabulary is going to get our students in using the language in something which is really, really meaningful, because after all, they are getting hooked. The routine I see, I think, I wonder is pretty popular, and something that I wanted to share with you is that some of the teachers that were part of this project went a step further into saying, for example, I see, I think, I wonder, okay, I see, I think, I feel. Because when you say, I see, I think, I feel, I am responding emotionally to what I see. An excellent opportunity to teach the language of emotions and to tap of emotions, because emotions are part of what children bring to the classroom. So this question, I see, I think, I feel, I see, I think, I remember. This is, of course, tapping on experience. Maybe I see a girl, and I see a girl going to school. I think it's her first day at school. Oh, I remember once when it was my first day at school. So this is how we get children into, of course, tapping on prior experience. Then we've got the I see, I think, I relate, which is excellent for teaching children how to make connections. And last but not least, we've got I see, I think, I compare. So this is where children can get to compare what they see, compare or contrast, of course. This that I'm showing you, dear colleagues, has given us excellent results. It's like we would notice such a change from a very passive role in just the teacher being the one who was reading aloud to discussions that were so rich. There was so much going on. Everybody wanted to talk. So this is what I mean by getting students hooked on the books that we choose for them. I'm going to show you now one of my favorite activities created by one of the teachers in the group is called my Schemata console command. I'm not going to take it for granted. Schemata is everything that children bring to our classes. It's their prior knowledge, it's their experience, it's their beliefs, their assumptions, it's their culture, it's their values. And in these classes where we implemented all this, we actually taught this to the children. We taught them that using Schemata was going to help them have a better understanding of anything, not only what they read, but also what they saw as an image. So this console command has buttons, and each of the buttons is part of what they've got in their Schemata. So one is prior knowledge, and the other one is experience, the other one is feelings and emotions, the other one is beliefs, values, and other. So the kids had to work with their own console command by coloring or by pressing the button that had got activated by the cover of the book or the title of the story. And this was simply amazing, because the children would say, okay, I've colored my experience button. Why? Oh, because what I saw in the cover reminded me of, or they would color the one that had to do with feelings and emotions, because it was kind of, oh my, what I saw or the title of the book makes me feel. So it was really so metacognitive, in the sense that children could not only tell you what is it that got activated, maybe just by the cover of the book, but why? What is it that had happened inside their minds? And they could verbalize it. They could share that with the rest. How amazing is that? Another very nice strategy to use with children is book walks. A book walk has to do with showing the children just the illustrations in the storybook without reading the story. This works particularly well with the children who cannot read yet. But something that we did with the teachers working in primary with children who already read was to cover the print so that children would just focus on illustrations. So this was the book walk. Remember that the other one was just the cover walk. This is the book walk. This is browsing the book by just looking at the illustrations, and the children would have their own question wheels. And as they watched, and remember that we insisted a lot on slow looking, they would pose questions. Who, why, where, what, when, what if, how, and can. And the teachers who were conducting the read-alouds would have a big question wheel where they would jot down the questions posed by the children. And it was fantastic because then after reading we could go back to the question wheel to try to see which of those questions had been actually answered and which questions probably had not been answered as we read the story. And there was one more activity that I really, really enjoyed watching in action and conducting myself, which is making students get or choose a picture or an illustration from the storybook. It might be the cover or the back cover or a picture or illustration in particular. They would choose it, they would describe it, and then they immediately would say what connection they had been able to make. Well, I can see this and I connect it immediately with. Remember that making connections is one of the top reading strategies to develop in children. So they will probably make connections with themselves and with their lives, or they might make connections with other texts, intertextuality, or they might make connections with their knowledge of the world. So it was really, really very good because when carrying out this activity, some kids had selected the same picture, but they had made different connections. How amazing is that? So the children would say, oh, I chose the picture in which the girl is. Oh, I chose that one too. But when we started discussing connections, their minds had gone wild. So it was really, really very exciting to see in action. And then there is this picture detectives, which was also great. So it was, okay, this that I see in the picture plus something that got ignited in my schemata equals my conclusion or my inference. And we actually loved telling the primary children that they were detectives because inferences are based on clues. So we really liked to play with this question of detectives and clues. And it worked wonderfully. And I'm telling you, dear colleagues, that we have implemented this not only with children who could read and write, but also with children who were not reading and writing yet, who could express everything through drawings. And I was just listening to Vinny before, and I said, you don't need any reward here. The reward is then getting into the storybook and cross-checking your predictions. So I think it's really, really worth trying. And then, of course, then there's this skimming and scanning. Again, I'm not going to take this for granted, but skimming is associated to previewing, and scanning has to do with finding specific information in the text. So I'm going to show you how important it is and how wonderful it is that we can work with hands. Can you see my hand? Okay, so the idea is to work with story hands. So for example, the children first, they have to say the name of the story, and then they have to say who are the characters, and then they have to say the setting of the story, which was the problem, and which was the resolution, and voila, you've got a perfect retelling or summary of the story. And then, for example, with older children in a primary, they could say which was the main topic of the story. And then, of course, they had to find 4 details to support that. It was really, really, really good, and it really worked, especially the first one, The retelling hand was a hit. The children got used to saying, okay, the name of the story was this, and the characters and the setting, the problem, the resolution. It was a perfect way of summarizing. But something that you can also do with a hand is use previewing. That is to say, paying attention to the cover of the book and trying to anticipate those 5 elements just based on the cover of the book. And then as you read, you cross-check. So it really, really works as well. Now, something else that I wanted to share with all of you, and I think I'm coming to an end now, but it's what the teacher said after having implemented this wonderful reading aloud and activities, which ended up being critical to thinking and visual literacy and engagement and more. Miss Marina G said that I didn't feel very confident at first, but eventually I really understood how important it is for children as readers and thinkers to engage in these activities. Not only did they get hooked on the stories, but they were able to make very smart predictions and connections. Miss Adriana said, a whole class with a storybook was my first reaction. Well, it works, and we are all hooked for days. She says that she actually would spend an entire class working on the cover and the back cover of a book. Miss Gabriela said, reading aloud used to be only for fun in my classes. We still have fun, but we do lots of thinking, and I love it. Mr. Pablo, and he said, my favorite part is when, as I read, they find answers to their questions or cross-check their predictions. You can tell from their expression on their faces. And Miss Paula says, I now design my own previewing worksheets. Actually, the console is her creation. So these are a little bit of the pictures from this wonderful project. And I guess because David is there, I guess that we are coming to an end. So as you can see, hooked, 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 and more hooked children. So this is the moment when I read your questions, and I really, really hope that you can try
so
any
much
of
for
these
that,
activities
Luciana.
yourselves.
I loved all of those very practical ideas that I think those of us working with primary all around the world will really be able to try out and also adapt. So thank you for covering so much in your presentation. It was wonderful. Thank you. We unfortunately don't have time for questions, but the good news, but the good news is that Luciana will be back at 1600 GMT, so 6 p.m. GMT in quite a few hours. And she will be representing National Geographic Learning, and she'll be sharing more practical examples and ideas from her experience. Also, during Luciana's talk, it really reminded me of the work of a new Facebook group called PEPELT, and this Facebook group is focused on picture books. Sinem has just shared their Facebook link there, and they really talk about the things Luciana was covering. So storybook as object, really working with those so-called peritextual features, the front cover, the back cover, the sleeves, and really developing children's concepts of print. So do check out PEPELT, and also come back for Luciana at 1800 GMT. Thank you so much again. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.